When humanity received a message from the stars, Dr. Elena Rodriguez never imagined it would come with a warning, or that saving her own life would mean bridging two worlds to stop the universe from unraveling. Dr. Elena Rodriguez couldn't believe what she was seeing on her computer screen. She rubbed her eyes and looked again, but the data was still there, glowing bright against the darkness of her small office at the observatory. It was almost midnight, and she'd been analyzing radio signals from deep space for what felt like forever. Most nights it was just random noise, the kind of cosmic static that meant absolutely nothing. But tonight was different. The pattern on her screen was repeating itself, over and over again, like someone tapping out a rhythm on a door. And it wasn't just any pattern. It was mathematical. Prime numbers arranged in a sequence that no natural phenomenon could ever create. Elena's hand started shaking as she reached for her phone. She'd been doing this job for 15 years. 15 long years of late nights, cold coffee, and mostly disappointment. People always asked her if she really believed there was life out there in the universe. She always said yes, but deep down, she'd started to wonder if she'd ever actually find proof. Well, tonight she had her answer. Within an hour, her colleague Dr. James Park arrived at the observatory, his hair sticking up in all directions because he'd clearly just jumped out of bed. He looked at the data, ran his own analysis, and his face went pale. They called the director. The director called the National Science Foundation. By morning, observatories all around the world were pointing their equipment at the same spot in space, and every single one of them was picking up the same signal. The news broke 3 days later. You couldn't turn on a television or open a social media app without seeing something about it. Some people were excited, others were terrified. Religious leaders gave sermons about what it all meant. Politicians held emergency meetings. Scientists appeared on every news channel trying to explain what they knew, which honestly wasn't much yet. Elena barely slept for the next 2 weeks. She was part of a massive international team now, all working together to decode the message, and it was definitely a message. The more they analyzed it, the clearer that became. There were images hidden in the data, three-dimensional structures that looked like star maps. There were more mathematical sequences, some so complex that it took their best minds days to understand them. Then Elena found something that made her heart skip a beat. Coordinates, specific coordinates pointing to a location in our own solar system, just outside Earth's orbit, and there was a date attached to those coordinates. 3 months from now, when she presented her findings to the team, the room went completely silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Someone was coming. They weren't just sending messages from light years away. They were already on their way, and they were going to be here soon. The world changed overnight. Some countries started building weapons just in case. Others started planning welcome ceremonies. The United Nations formed a special committee to handle first contact protocols. Elena was asked to lead the scientific response team, which was both the greatest honor of her life and the most terrifying responsibility she could imagine. She spent every waking moment preparing, learning everything she could about communication theory, xenobiology, even basic diplomacy. She worked with linguists who specialized in creating systems to communicate with species that might not even have vocal cords. She consulted with psychologists about how to handle the stress of meeting beings from another world. The media camped outside the observatory. They wanted interviews, statements, predictions. Elena tried to avoid them as much as possible. How could she predict anything when she had no idea what was coming? Were they friendly, hostile? Would they even be able to communicate with us? Every question led to 10 more questions. Her mother called her every day, worried sick. Her younger brother thought the whole thing was the coolest event in human history. Her best friend from college asked her if she was scared. Elena didn't know how to answer that. She was scared, yes, but she was also more excited than she'd ever been in her entire life. As the date got closer, the signal got stronger. Whatever was sending it was definitely getting nearer to Earth. Space agencies tracked something moving through the solar system, something that didn't follow any trajectory that made sense for a natural object. It was decelerating, which meant it was under intelligent control. The last week before the arrival date felt like the longest week of Elena's life. She couldn't eat. She could barely sleep. She kept running through scenarios in her mind, trying to prepare for every possibility. The world was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. On the night before the scheduled arrival, Elena stood outside the observatory and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, someone was looking back at us. Someone had reached out across the vast emptiness of space to say hello. And tomorrow, everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe was going to change forever. She thought about all the generations of humans who had looked up at those same stars and wondered if we were alone. All the stories, all the speculation, all the hope and fear wrapped up in that simple question, and now finally we were going to get an answer. Elena went back inside and checked the preparations one more time. The meeting site was ready. The communication equipment was tested and retested. The security teams were in place. The medical teams were standing by. The diplomatic teams had their protocols. Everything that could be done had been done. All they could do now was wait and see what the morning would bring. The sun was just starting to rise over the Pacific Ocean when it appeared. Elena was on a specially equipped naval vessel, part of the international team assembled to witness the arrival. She'd barely slept and her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but none of that mattered now. The ship appeared without any sound, without any warning. One moment the sky was empty and the next moment it was just there. Hovering about 1,000 feet above the water, completely silent and absolutely still. Elena's breath caught in her throat. It was beautiful. That was the first thought that went through her mind, and it surprised her. She'd expected something mechanical, cold, maybe even threatening. But this ship looked almost alive. Its surface was smooth and curved, reflecting the morning light in shades of silver and pale blue. The metal, if it even was metal, seemed to shift and flow like water frozen in mid-ripple. Nobody on the vessel moved. Nobody spoke. They all just stood there, staring up at proof that we weren't alone in the universe. Elena felt tears running down her cheeks and didn't bother to wipe them away. Then something changed. A section of the ship's surface began to glow with a soft golden light. The light grew brighter, and Elena could see something forming within it. A smaller craft was emerging from the main ship, descending slowly toward the ocean surface. The smaller craft landed gently on the water, floating there like it weighed nothing at all. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was it. This was the moment. She glanced at the other members of her team. Dr. Park gave her a small nod of encouragement. General Thompson, the military liaison, had his hand near his weapon but hadn't drawn it. Ambassador Wright, the lead diplomat, looked as nervous as Elena felt. A doorway appeared in the side of the craft. Elena hadn't seen it open. It was just suddenly there and light was spilling out from inside. 3 figures emerged. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with long limbs that moved with an almost liquid grace. Their skin had a faint luminescence to it, and as Elena watched, the color shifted from a pale blue to a soft green. They wore what looked like simple robes made of a material that caught the light in strange ways. But it was their faces that held Elena's attention. They were humanoid enough that she could read expressions, or thought she could. Large eyes that seemed to take up half their faces, in colors she'd never seen before. High cheekbones and delicate features. But there was something ancient in those eyes, something that spoke of time and distance beyond human comprehension. The figure in the center stepped forward. In her hand she held a small device that looked like a smooth stone. When she spoke, her voice was musical, with tones that human vocal cords could never produce. But then the device in her hand glowed and a voice spoke in perfect English. Greetings. We are travelers from a world you would call Lyra. I am called Ambassador Zira. We have been searching for you for a very long time. Elena's training kicked in, though her voice shook slightly when she spoke. Welcome to Earth. I'm Dr. Elena Rodriguez, and this is our first contact team. We received your message. The alien who called herself Zira tilted her head in what might have been curiosity. Her skin shifted to a warm gold color. You decoded it quickly. Your species shows remarkable intelligence for one so young. Ambassador Wright stepped forward then, taking over the formal diplomatic greeting. But Elena couldn't stop staring at Zira. The way she moved, the way her skin changed colors. Was it emotional? Environmental? Some form of communication? Over the next few hours, they established basic protocols. The aliens, or Lyrans as they called themselves, agreed to return the next day for more formal discussions. They explained that they didn't want to overwhelm humanity by bringing their entire delegation all at once. Zira said something that stuck with Elena. First meetings between species are delicate. We must build trust slowly. That evening, Elena was part of the debriefing team. Everyone had questions. What did they want? Why were they here? Were there more of them? The military wanted to know about their weapons capabilities. The scientists wanted to know everything about their biology, their technology, their culture. The diplomats were already worrying about how to negotiate with a species that might not share any of our values or concepts. Elena couldn't sleep that night either. She kept thinking about the way Zira had looked at her. There had been something in those alien eyes. Sadness, maybe? Or was she just projecting human emotions onto a being that might experience the universe in completely different ways? The next morning, Zira returned with a larger delegation. They brought gifts, pieces of art from their world that were so beautiful they made Elena's chest ache. They shared food, though they explained that their biology was different enough that neither species could safely eat what the other ate. They answered basic questions about their journey and their technology, but they were clearly building up to something. Elena could sense it in the way Zira kept glancing at the other members of her delegation, in the way her skin kept shifting to darker, cooler colors. Finally, on the third day of meetings, Zira spoke the words that would change everything. "We need to tell you why we're really here," she said, and her skin had gone a deep, troubled blue. "We came to warn you, and we came to ask for your help." The room went very quiet. "There is something moving through this galaxy," Zira continued, "a wave of dark energy that destroys everything in its path. It consumed our homeworld's sister planets. It's consuming other systems even as we speak. We've been fleeing from it, searching for others like us, hoping to find a way to stop it." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice through the translator was heavy with regret. "Your solar system is in its path. In approximately 200 years, it will reach your sun." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Around her, she could hear gasps and shocked murmurs. 200 years. That seemed like a long time, but for a species, for a civilization, it was nothing. It was barely enough time to blink. "But there's hope," Zira said quickly. "That's why we're here. Alone, neither of our species can solve this. But together, combining your fresh perspectives with our accumulated knowledge, we might find an answer. We might save both our peoples." The next few weeks were intense in ways Elena had never experienced. The world was in chaos. News of the threat had leaked despite everyone's best efforts to keep it contained until they had more information. People reacted in every way imaginable. Some gave up, deciding that if the world was going to end in 200 years, there was no point in planning for the future. Others doubled down on life, determined to make every moment count. Religious movements sprang up overnight. Conspiracy theories spread faster than facts, but Elena didn't have time to worry about any of that. She was too busy working with Zira and her team, trying to understand the problem they were facing. The Lyrans had been studying this phenomenon for generations. They had data, models, observations from dozens of worlds that had been lost to the dark energy wave. It was hard to explain exactly what the wave was. Even the Lyrans didn't fully understand it. It wasn't quite like anything from Earth physics. The best Elena could describe it was like reality itself was unraveling, leaving nothing but empty space behind. Stars were extinguished. Planets broke apart. Everything just ceased to exist. Elena found herself spending more and more time with Zira. The ambassador had requested that Elena be her primary point of contact for the scientific collaboration, and Elena was both honored and terrified by the responsibility. They worked together in a specially constructed facility, a neutral space where scientists from both species could share ideas without interference from their respective governments. The cultural differences were fascinating. The Lyrans thought in timescales that made Elena's head hurt. They talked about events from thousands of years ago like they had happened yesterday. Their species lived much longer than humans, and their society had been spacefaring for over 10,000 years. They'd seen civilizations rise and fall. They'd witnessed cosmic events that humans had only theorized about, but they were also surprisingly emotional. Elena had thought that a species so advanced would be cold and logical, but the Lyrans felt things deeply. Zira explained that their color-changing skin wasn't just a physical trait, but was directly connected to their emotional state. Deep blue meant sadness or worry. Gold meant hope or happiness. Red was anger or passion. Purple was curiosity. It was like wearing your heart on your sleeve, except it was your entire body. One evening, after a particularly long session reviewing data, Zira asked Elena about human families. Elena found herself talking about her mother, about how worried she'd been throughout this whole process. about her brother and his eternal optimism, about her father who'd passed away years ago, and how much she wished he could have lived to see this. Zira's skin shifted to a soft lavender color that Elena had learned meant empathy. "We understand loss," the alien said quietly. "We've lost so much to the wave. Entire worlds full of people we knew, places we loved. That's why this matters so much to us. Not just survival, but preservation. Remembering what was, and ensuring that something continues." It was the first time Elena truly understood what this meant to the Lyrans. They weren't just running from destruction. They were carrying the memories of their lost worlds with them, trying to make sure that someone somewhere would remember that those places had existed. The scientific collaboration was producing results, but slowly. Human scientists brought fresh ideas that the Lyrans hadn't considered. The Lyrans had technology and data that opened up entirely new fields of research for humans. Together, they were making progress on understanding the wave, even if they hadn't yet figured out how to stop it. But not everyone was happy about the collaboration. There were protests outside the facility almost every day. Some groups claimed the aliens were lying, that this was all an elaborate trick to conquer Earth. Others thought the government was hiding the truth about what the aliens really wanted, and some just couldn't accept that humanity needed help from anyone, even in the face of extinction. Then there were the governments themselves. Every nation wanted access to Lyran technology. Some saw it as a way to solve Earth's problems, from climate change to disease. Others saw it as a weapon, a way to gain advantage over their rivals. The Lyrans were careful about what they shared, and that made some people angry and suspicious. The tension came to a head during what should have been a routine meeting. Elena was presenting findings to a joint Human-Lyran research committee when alarms started blaring throughout the facility. Security personnel rushed in, shouting about a breach, and before Elena could process what was happening, armed soldiers wearing unmarked uniforms burst into the room. They weren't there to protect anyone. They were there to take the Lyran scientists hostage. The next few minutes were pure chaos. Zira moved faster than Elena thought possible, pushing her behind a heavy desk as gunfire erupted in the room. The Lyran security team fought back with weapons that created barriers of solid light. Human security forces came streaming in from another entrance, and suddenly nobody could tell who was fighting whom. Elena's ears were ringing from the noise. She could smell smoke and feel her heart hammering against her ribs. She peeked around the desk and saw Zira trying to reach one of the younger Lyran scientists who had been hit by falling debris. The ambassador's skin was flashing between red and black, colors Elena had never seen her display before. Without thinking, Elena ran out from her cover. She grabbed the young Lyran scientist by the arms and started dragging them toward safety. She felt something hot pass by her shoulder, heard someone shouting at her to get down, and then there was a searing pain in her side and she was on the ground, looking up at the ceiling lights that suddenly seemed very far away. Zira's face appeared above her, those large alien eyes wide with what Elena recognized as fear. The ambassador's hands were pressing against Elena's side, and Elena could see dark red blood seeping between those long, elegant fingers. "Hold on," Zira was saying, her skin cycling rapidly through colors that Elena couldn't interpret. "Please hold on. You saved Kale. You saved one of ours. Let me save you." Elena tried to say it was okay, tried to tell Zira not to worry, but the words wouldn't come out right. The ceiling lights were getting dimmer. She could hear shouting in the distance, but it seemed less important now. She felt very cold and very tired. Then Zira placed something against Elena's chest, something that felt warm and alive and completely alien. Elena felt it moving under her skin, spreading through her body like liquid light. The pain in her side faded. Her vision cleared, and suddenly she could breathe again. Deep, full breaths that made her realize how close she'd come to not breathing at all. "What did you do?" Elena whispered. Zira's skin was pale gray now, a color Elena suspected meant fear or perhaps regret. "I used our medical technology to save your life. We're not supposed to share it with developing species. There are protocols, rules meant to protect both our peoples. But I couldn't let you die, not when you risked everything to help one of ours." The fighting had stopped. The attackers were being arrested or had fled. Human and Lyran security forces were checking the wounded and securing the area, but Elena could barely focus on any of that. She was too busy feeling the alien technology working inside her, mending tissue and bone, doing things that human medicine wouldn't have been able to do. Dr. Park helped her sit up. his face pale with shock and relief. General Thompson was already on his radio, reporting the situation and calling for medical teams. Ambassador Wright was trying to calm the Lyran delegation members who were understandably upset and frightened. But Elena's eyes were on Zira, who sat on the floor beside her with her long limbs folded awkwardly, and her skin still that awful gray color. "Will you be in trouble?" Elena asked quietly. "Probably," Zira admitted. "Our council is very strict about technological contamination. They'll say I've compromised the natural development of your species. They may decide that Earth is too dangerous to work with, that humans are too violent and unpredictable." Elena felt a wave of anger and frustration. She'd been shot trying to help a Lyran, and now Zira might be punished for saving her life. And if the Lyrans left, humanity would face the dark energy wave alone, with no hope of survival. "Then we need to make sure they understand," Elena said, pushing herself to her feet even though Dr. Park tried to stop her. "We need to show them that what happened here today wasn't representative of all humanity, that we're worth the risk." The aftermath of the attack was complicated and messy. The soldiers who'd stormed the facility belonged to a rogue military faction that believed the only way to gain Lyran technology was through force. They'd acted without government authorization, but that didn't make the situation any less damaging. The Lyran Council was meeting to decide whether to break off contact with Earth entirely. Elena spent 3 days in a medical facility being monitored. The alien technology that had saved her life was still inside her, and nobody knew what the long-term effects might be. Human doctors ran test after test, fascinated and terrified by what they found. The device, or organism, or whatever it was, had integrated completely with her cellular structure. It was repairing damage and optimizing her biological functions in ways that seemed impossible. But Elena couldn't focus on her own health. She was too worried about what would happen if the Lyrans left. She lobbied everyone she could reach, from her direct supervisors to government officials to media contacts. She argued that humanity deserved another chance, that the actions of a few extremists shouldn't condemn the entire species. On the 4th day, Zira came to visit her. The ambassador's skin was a dull blue-gray, and she moved with a weariness that Elena had never seen in her before. "The council has made their decision," Zira said without preamble. "We're leaving Earth." Elena felt her heart sink. "No, there has to be something we can do. Some of the council members believe humans are too dangerous to work with," Zira continued. "They point out that in the short time we've been here, we've witnessed violence, theft attempts, and now a direct attack on our delegation. They say that any species that can't unite even in the face of extinction isn't worth saving." "That's not fair," Elena said fiercely. "Yes, some humans reacted badly. But look at all the others. Look at the scientists who've been working day and night to collaborate with you. Look at the ordinary people who've welcomed you, who've tried to learn about your culture. Don't judge us all by the worst of us." Zira's color shifted slightly toward purple. "That's essentially what you told the council." Elena blinked. "What? You didn't think I was the only one arguing for humanity, did you?" A hint of gold appeared in Zira's skin. "I told them about you running into danger to save Kale. About the security personnel, both human and Lyran, who fought side by side to protect each other. About Dr. Park and the other scientists who've shared their knowledge freely, asking for nothing in return." "Did it work?" Elena asked, afraid to hope. "Partially," Zira admitted. "The council agreed to one final test. They want you to address them directly, to make the case for humanity. If you can convince them that Earth is capable of change, that humans can grow beyond their current limitations, they'll agree to continue the collaboration." Elena felt the weight of that responsibility settle on her shoulders. She was being asked to speak for all of humanity, to convince an alien council that her entire species deserved a chance at survival. How could anyone be adequate for that task? But then she thought about all the people she'd met over the past months, the dedicated scientists staying up all night to solve impossible problems, the teachers who'd revised their curriculums to include lessons about the Lyrans and the importance of cooperation, the children who'd written letters and drawn pictures welcoming the visitors from space, the ordinary people who'd chosen hope over fear. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow," Zira said. "And Elena, I need to tell you something. The device I used to save you, It's changed you in ways beyond just healing. It's created a connection between us. I can sense some of your emotions now, and you might be able to sense some of mine. The council knows about this. Some of them think it makes you compromised, that you'll just tell us what we want to hear. Elena considered that. She did feel something from Zira, a kind of emotional echo that hadn't been there before, worry, hope, and something that felt like deep affection. Can you tell what I'm feeling right now? Yes, Zira said softly. Determination and fear, but not for yourself. For your species. Then you know I'm going to tell them the truth, Elena said. Not what they want to hear, but what they need to hear. Will that be enough? I don't know, Zira admitted, but it's the only chance we have. The next day, Elena stood in front of the Lyran Council. There were 12 of them, projected as holograms since most had remained on the main ship. They sat in a semicircle, their faces unreadable, their skin colors carefully neutral. Elena had spent all night preparing what to say. She'd written speeches, revised them, thrown them out, and started over. In the end, she decided to just speak from the heart. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that humanity is perfect, she began. We're not. We're violent, we're short-sighted, we're divided in ways that probably seem foolish to you. We've barely made it out of our own solar system. We've spent more of our history fighting each other than working together. She could see some of the council members shifting, probably thinking this was exactly what they expected to hear. But here's what else we are, Elena continued, her voice growing stronger. We're resilient. We're creative. We've survived ice, ages and plagues and countless disasters by adapting and learning. And we're young. You've had 10,000 years to work out your differences and develop your technology. We've had, maybe 10,000 years of recorded civilization? And look at how far we've come in that time. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The attack on your delegation was terrible. I'm not going to minimize that. But it was carried out by a tiny fraction of humanity, people who were scared and didn't know how to handle that fear. The vast majority of humans have responded to your arrival with wonder, curiosity, and a desire to learn. One of the council members spoke, their voice deep and resonant. But will that be enough? In 200 years, when the wave arrives, will humanity have united enough to face it? I don't know, Elena admitted. But I know we have a better chance of making it if we're working with you than if we're alone. And here's something I think you might not have considered. You've been running from this wave for generations. You've lost worlds and people and parts of your culture. You're tired and you're scared, and you're carrying the weight of all that loss. She could see Zira in the audience, her skin glowing a soft gold. Humanity doesn't have that burden, Elena continued. We're not tired. We're not ready to give up before we've even started fighting. Maybe what you need isn't just our ideas or our perspectives. Maybe what you need is our hope, our stubbornness, our refusal to accept that anything is impossible. The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then another council member spoke. You have integrated Lyran biotechnology into your body. How has this changed your view of your own species? Elena thought about that carefully. It's made me more aware of how limited we are in some ways. But it's also made me more proud of what we've accomplished with those limitations. And it's given me hope that with your knowledge and our determination, we can become something neither of our species could be alone. The council conferred among themselves in their own language, which Elena's translator couldn't process. She stood there, her heart pounding, knowing that the fate of two species might rest on whatever they decided in the next few minutes. Finally, the central council member spoke. Dr. Rodriguez, your honesty is refreshing. Most species we encounter try to hide their flaws and exaggerate their strengths. You've done the opposite. This gives us hope that humans are capable of the self-awareness necessary for true growth. Elena hardly dared to breathe. We've decided to continue the collaboration, the council member continued. But with conditions. There will be limits on technology sharing, we'll increase security, and we expect the human governments to prosecute. those responsible for the attack and to implement measures to prevent similar incidents. We can do that, Elena said quickly. We will do that. There's one more thing, another council member added. You've become the first true hybrid between our species, Dr. Rodriguez. This makes you uniquely positioned to serve as a bridge between our peoples. We ask that you take on this role officially. It will not be easy. You'll face suspicion from both sides, but we believe it's necessary. Elena looked at Zira, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. She thought about everything that had led to this moment, the years of searching for signals in the dark, the first contact, the shared work and growing friendship, the attack and the sacrifice. I accept, she said. 5 years passed. 5 years of hard work, breakthrough discoveries, and slow but steady progress. Elena lived in a unique position, caught between two worlds in a way that no one else could truly understand. The Lyran biotechnology in her body had become a part of her, extending her lifespan and giving her insights into the Lyran way of thinking that no other human possessed. But she remained undeniably human in her perspective and her values. The collaboration between humans and Lyrans grew stronger over those years. Research facilities were established on every continent. Young humans studied under Lyran teachers, learning sciences that their grandparents couldn't have imagined. Lyran scientists, in turn, were consistently surprised and delighted by human creativity and unconventional problem-solving approaches. There were still tensions, of course. Some humans resented the Lyran presence, seeing it as a form of colonization. Some Lyrans remained skeptical about humanity's ability to truly change. But slowly, gradually, the two species were learning to work together. Elena's relationship with Zira had evolved into something that neither of them had quite expected. They were friends, certainly, but it was more than that. The connection created by the biotechnology that had saved Elena's life had deepened over time. They could sense each other's emotions across distances. They thought in complementary ways, each filling in gaps in the other's reasoning. Some humans whispered that Elena had become too alien. Some Lyrans worried that Zira had become too attached to human ways of thinking. But it was precisely this unique partnership that led to the breakthrough. They were reviewing data from a probe that had been sent to observe the dark energy wave at what they considered a safe distance. The probe had been destroyed as expected, but not before sending back unprecedented readings about the wave's structure. It's not random, Elena said, staring at the data. I mean, we knew it wasn't random, but look at this pattern. It's almost like there's an intelligence behind it. Zira's skin shifted to deep purple, the color of intense curiosity. Show me. They worked through the night, and by morning they had a theory. The dark energy wave wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was the result of an ancient experiment gone wrong. Something created by a civilization that had existed millions of years before either humans or Lyrans had evolved. And if it had been created, maybe it could be stopped. The theory was controversial. Many scientists, both human and Lyran, didn't believe it. But Elena and Zira kept digging, kept researching, kept building their case. They found evidence in the wave's behavior, in the way it seemed to avoid certain types of stellar formations. They found mathematical patterns that suggested deliberate design rather than natural evolution. It took 3 more years to develop a working hypothesis for how to stop the wave. The solution was elegant, but terrifyingly complex. They would need to create a counterwave, essentially using the same principle that had generated the dark energy wave, but in reverse. It would require the combined resources of multiple civilizations, the cooperation of species they hadn't even met yet, and technology that was still theoretical. But it was possible. For the first time since the Lyrans had arrived on Earth, there was real hope. Elena presented their findings at a joint session of the Earth-Lyran Alliance Council. The room was packed with representatives from every nation on Earth and every faction of the Lyran fleet. She'd given hundreds of presentations over the years, but this one felt different. This was the one that mattered. We've been thinking about this problem wrong, she began. We've been treating the dark energy wave like a force of nature, like a tsunami or an earthquake. Something to be survived or avoided, but not something that could be stopped. But what if it's not natural? What if it's something that was made and therefore something that can be unmade? She went through the evidence, building her case piece by piece. She showed them the patterns, the mathematical structures, the anomalies that didn't fit with any natural phenomenon, and then she showed them the solution. It won't be easy, she admitted. We're looking at a project that will take generations. We'll need to build structures larger than anything either of our species has ever attempted. We'll need to develop new technologies, new mathematical frameworks, new ways of thinking about the fabric of space itself. But we can do it. The room erupted in questions. How could they be sure the theory was correct? What would happen if they were wrong? How could they possibly gather the resources needed for such a massive project? Elena answered each question as best she could. Zira stood beside her, adding details and clarifications, her skin glowing a steady gold that helped calm the anxious crowd. Finally, the senior human representative stood. Dr. Rodriguez, Ambassador Zira, what you're proposing would require a commitment of resources and effort beyond anything humanity has ever attempted. It would mean transforming our entire society, our entire economy toward this single goal. How can we justify that? How can we ask people to sacrifice so much for something that won't even come to fruition for generations? Elena looked out at the assembled representatives. Humans and Lyrans sitting side by side. 10 years ago, they hadn't even known the other existed. 5 years ago, they'd nearly gone to war. And now they were working together, planning together, hoping together. Because the alternative is extinction, she said simply. Not just for humans, not just for Lyrans, but for every species in the path of that wave. Because we have children, and our children will have children, and they deserve a future. Because we've been given something precious here, something that rarely happens in the universe. We've found each other. Two species that can work together, that can complement each other's strengths and compensate for each other's weaknesses. That's worth fighting for. She paused, then added more softly, and because for the first time since Zira and her people arrived on Earth, we have hope, real hope. Not just the hope that we might survive a little longer, but hope that we might actually win, that we might save not just ourselves, but countless others. Isn't that worth any sacrifice? The vote was close, but it passed. The Alliance for Cosmic Preservation was officially formed, with a mandate to develop the counterwave technology and build the massive structures necessary to deploy it. It would be the work of multiple generations. Children not yet born would carry on the project. But it was possible. That evening, Elena and Zira stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The Lyran ship was visible in the distance, its surface reflecting the dying light. Do you think we can really do it? Elena asked quietly. Zira's skin shifted through several colors before settling on a warm gold mixed with touches of blue. Hope and uncertainty blended together. I don't know, but for the first time in generations, my people believe it's worth trying. That's because of you. Because of what you've shown us. It's not just me, Elena protested. It's thousands of people working together. Yes, Zira agreed. But someone had to be first. Someone had to be willing to run into danger to save one of us. Someone had to stand up and say that we were worth saving, even when it wasn't easy or safe. You were that someone. Elena felt the familiar emotional echo from Zira through their connection, gratitude, affection, and something deeper that neither of them had quite put into words yet. When we first decoded your message, Elena said, I was so scared. I didn't know if you were coming to destroy us or save us or just study us. I never imagined that 5 years later I'd be standing here planning the survival of multiple species with one of you as my closest friend. Friend. Zira repeated the word carefully. Is that what we are? Elena smiled. You saved my life. I saved one of yours. We've worked together for 5 years. We can sense each other's emotions. If that's not friendship, I don't know what is. Zira's skin rippled with colors Elena had learned to recognize as the Lyran equivalent of laughter. Fair enough, though I suspect our peoples would struggle to define exactly what we are to each other. There's no precedent for this kind of relationship. Then we'll make our own precedent, Elena said. We're good at that. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the dark energy wave was still moving, still destroying. But now for the first time there was a plan to stop it. The next morning, Elena gave an interview to a group of journalists from around the world. They wanted to know about the project, about the timeline, about what it would mean for ordinary people's daily lives. It means change, Elena told them honestly. Major change. We'll need to redirect resources on a scale humanity has never attempted before. We'll need to educate a new generation of scientists and engineers. We'll need to work with the Lyrans in ways that go beyond what we're doing now. It won't always be comfortable, and it won't always be easy. Some people are saying this is giving up too much of our independence, one journalist said, that we're becoming dependent on alien technology and alien knowledge. Elena had heard this argument before. She'd heard it a lot over the past 5 years. We're not giving up our independence. We're choosing to work with partners who can help us survive. There's a difference. And honestly, the Lyrans need us just as much as we need them. They have the knowledge and experience, but they'd lost hope. We reminded them why survival matters, why fighting is worthwhile. Another journalist asked, "What do you say to people who think we should be focusing on Earth's problems, like poverty and climate change, instead of spending resources on this project?" "I say we can do both," Elena replied. "In fact, we have to do both. The technologies we're developing to fight the wave will also help us solve problems here on Earth. The cooperation we're learning with the Lyrans is teaching us how to cooperate with each other, and frankly, none of our current problems will matter if we're all dead in 200 years. After the interview, she met with a group of students who were part of the new Joint Human-Lyran educational program. They were bright, eager, and full of questions that Elena couldn't always answer. "Will we really see the counterwave built in our lifetime?" a young girl asked. "Probably not the complete structure," Elena admitted. "But you'll see the foundations laid. You'll be part of the early stages, and your children or grandchildren will complete what we're starting now." "That's so far away," another student said, sounding disappointed. Elena understood the feeling. Humans weren't good at thinking in such long timescales. It was one of the challenges they'd faced throughout the project. It is far away. But think about it this way. Every great achievement humanity has ever accomplished, from building cities to creating art to exploring space, started with people who knew they wouldn't live to see the final result. They did it anyway because they believed it mattered, because they wanted to leave something better for the people who came after them. A Lyran student, one of the younger ones who had been born after their people had fled their homeworld, spoke up in their musical language. Elena's translator rendered it as, "My parent says that before we met humans, they had stopped believing we could win. They thought we were just delaying the inevitable. But now they help build. They plan for futures they won't see. You gave them that back." Elena felt her throat tighten with emotion. "We gave it to each other. That's what makes this work." The years continued to pass. The project grew. More nations joined the alliance. The Lyrans made contact with 2 other species who were also in the path of the wave, and they joined the effort as well. The research facilities became small cities. The experimental structures in space grew larger and more complex. Elena watched as children who had been in elementary school when the Lyrans first arrived graduated from university with degrees in fields that hadn't existed before first contact. She saw young scientists, both human and Lyran, working together so seamlessly that they developed their own hybrid language mixing elements of both cultures. She also watched as some things stayed difficult. There were still conflicts, still misunderstandings, still groups on both sides who opposed the collaboration. But there were fewer of them now, and their voices grew quieter each year. On the 10th anniversary of first contact, there was a celebration at the main research facility. Representatives from all the allied species gathered to mark the occasion and to review the progress that had been made. Elena gave a speech, though she'd tried to avoid it. She'd